She didn't expect the night to turn into a nightmare. Maya, dressed in her elegant red gown, walked into the gala believing it was just another event her husband had to attend. But within minutes, the room that shimmered with wealth became the stage for something far darker. A billionaire with a crumbling empire, a simmering hatred he couldn't hide, and a single moment that would expose everything he tried to bury. When Maya fell into that pool, pushed in front of hundreds, no one expected what would happen next. The real shock came afterward. And it changed everything. Where are you watching from? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. Maya had always carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind that came from years of fighting to be seen in rooms where people like her were never expected to walk. As the wife of a rising black CEO, she had learned how to glide through corporate events with grace, even when the whispers around her tried to measure her worth. Her career in nonprofit legal work kept her grounded, reminding her every day that progress was possible, even when the world pushed back. Her life wasn't glamorous, not in the way the rich imagined it. She spent her mornings reviewing case files, her afternoons visiting clients who couldn't afford proper representation, and her evenings helping her husband navigate the fast-moving world of tech investments. Together, they had built a life rooted in resilience rather than privilege. Still, Maya always felt something shift when she entered high society spaces. The smiles felt tighter, the conversations quieter, the air heavier. People looked at her red dress, her brown skin, her presence, and silently questioned how she ended up there. She noticed it every time, but she never let it bend her spirit. When she and her husband received an invitation to the charity gala, Maya treated it like any other event. She knew her husband's billion-dollar deal was close to finalizing. She knew the room would be filled with powerful people who thought their influence made them untouchable. And she knew she would be judged before she even spoke, but she didn't know what hid behind the polished smiles of those who needed her husband's success to save their collapsing empire. She didn't know how fragile their pride truly was. And she didn't know that one man, one billionaire standing on the edge of financial ruin, would see her presence as an insult he couldn't tolerate. A storm was already forming around her. Maya just hadn't seen the first flash yet. From the moment Maya stepped into the gala, she felt the shift in the room. Conversations dipped. Eyes followed her more than her husband. Even the warm orange lighting couldn't soften the cold judgment hiding behind diamond smiles and champagne breaths. Yet she held her head high, her red dress flowing like quiet defiance. Across the ballroom, the billionaire hosting the event, Grant Huxley, watched her with an expression she had seen too many times before. A mixture of irritation, disbelief, and something far darker. His empire had been bleeding for months, and her husband's billion-dollar AI deal was his final lifeline. But instead of gratitude, Maya sensed resentment every time his gaze landed on her. Guests whispered as she walked by, pretending to admire the art on the walls while sneaking glances at her skin, her presence, her right to stand beside her successful husband. She ignored it until the tone shifted. During the silent auction preview, she overheard snippets of conversations, soft enough to hide behind politeness, sharp enough to cut. Not the kind of woman usually seen here. He could have married better. For appearances, these events have standards. Each comment added weight to the air around her. Yet Maya remained poised, breathing steadily, reminding herself why she came: to support her husband, not to win the approval of people who refused to see her humanity. But Grant Huxley wasn't content with quiet disdain. As the night progressed, he drank more than he should have, each glass sharpening whatever ugliness he usually kept hidden behind charm. His business advisory board surrounded him, whispering pressure into his ear, reminding him how badly he needed the deal, how embarrassing it was to beg a black CEO for salvation, how humiliating it must feel to see Maya standing confidently in the same room as his wealthy friends. That resentment bloomed into something volatile when Maya stepped out toward the terrace to get a moment of air. Grant watched her go jaw tight, knuckles whitening around his glass. His board followed his line of sight, their expressions turning predatory. They moved like a pack fueled by entitlement, whispering loudly enough for their intent to be unmistakable. Maya sensed danger the moment she stepped outside. The cool air should have calmed her, but instead it amplified the tension building behind her. The soft ripples of the pool reflected golden ballroom lights, creating a peaceful scene that didn't match the unease curling in her stomach. Then she heard footsteps, not casual, not friendly, deliberate. She turned and saw Grant approaching with 3 men beside him, their faces twisted with drunken superiority. The same men who had smiled politely earlier now looked at her like she had intruded on sacred ground. Their circle tightened without a word. Grant's voice was smooth at first, like a polished blade. He masked his rage with formalities, accusing her of disrespect, of acting above her place, of disrupting the image of his cherished event. Every word dripped with bitterness he could no longer control. Maya kept her composure, but the terrace felt smaller with every step they took. She tried to return inside, but one of the men casually shifted to block her path, an action so subtle yet so dangerous. Their taunts escalated. Their smiles curled into sneers. Their intentions sharpened. Atmosphere shifted from uncomfortable to threatening, to unmistakably hostile. Maya realized she was alone, cornered near the water with nowhere to step except backward, and Grant knew it. He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. The lights behind him flickered across the surface of the pool. Her heart hammered, and in that suspended moment, she understood something terrible. Whatever this man was about to do, he had already convinced himself he'd get away with it. The rising storm had finally reached her. Grant's voice cracked through the night like a weapon, loud enough to silence every sound on the terrace. The mask he had worn all evening shattered in an instant, revealing raw hatred that had simmered beneath his expensive suit and polished smile. His words struck like blows, each one fueled by entitlement, alcohol, and a lifetime of unchallenged power. Before Maya could step back, his hand shot out. The force of the shove lifted her off her feet. For a split second, she saw nothing but the blur of lights, the shock freezing time around her. The cold water swallowed her whole with a violent splash, dragging her beneath the surface. Her red gown fanned out around her like sinking flames, heavy and suffocating as it wrapped around her legs. Her lungs screamed for air. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Above the water, voices blended into chaotic noise, gasps, laughter, the sharp tap of phones recording. She surfaced with a desperate breath, mascara streaking down her face, the chlorine burning her eyes. The world above her twisted, Grant adjusting his cufflinks with sickening calm, the board members smirking, the glittering terrace lights blurred through her tears. Then everything stopped. A roar cut through the chaos. Maya, her husband's voice wasn't just loud, it was filled with a fury that made every guest turn. He pushed through the crowd with a force no one dared challenge, sprinting toward the pool as if something primal had taken control of him. Grant froze. The certainty he carried, the belief that he was untouchable, unstoppable, cracked the moment he saw Maya's husband, drenched in fear and rage, charging straight toward him. Phones rose higher. Whispers spread like wildfire. The truth of what Grant had done and who he had done it to was suddenly undeniable. Maya gripped the pool's edge, trembling as her husband reached for her with shaking hands, pulling her up with a gentleness that contrasted violently with the attack she'd endured. His chest heaved as he turned toward Grant. In that breathless moment, surrounded by witnesses and cameras, the balance of power shifted, and the billionaire, who believed he owned the night, realized he had just destroyed his entire world. Everything was about to change. The terrace was silent as Maya stood wrapped in a towel, shivering not from the cold, but from the reality of what had just happened. Cameras caught everything. The shove, the insults, the fall. The moment her dignity was ripped away in front of people who believed their wealth made them untouchable. But in the quiet aftermath, something unexpected happened. People didn't turn away. They stepped closer. Witnesses came forward with videos, statements, and the truth that Grant tried so hard to bury behind charm, money, and connections. By morning, the footage had spread across the country. News anchors dissected every frame. Social media exploded with outrage. Voices that had once been silent finally had proof of what discrimination looks like when no one is supposed to be watching. Grant's empire fractured almost instantly. Partners severed deals, investors fled. By the end of the week, the board he controlled had voted to remove him entirely. Every arrogant step he took, every cruel word he'd thrown, now echoed back at him in headlines, lawsuits, and investigations. But Maya's story didn't end in the pool. She chose to speak, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Her voice brought strength to people who had endured the same silent wounds. She refused to let the moment define her, but she used it to expose a deeper truth hiding behind wealth, privilege, and polished events. And slowly, the story shifted, that it was no longer about a billionaire's cruelty, that it became a lesson. A warning. A mirror held up to society. Because Maya's experience wasn't an isolated moment. It reflected something countless others face every day. A reminder that racism doesn't disappear just because people pretend it does. It lingers in boardrooms, social circles, and quiet corners where no one expects to be held accountable until someone forces the world to look. So now the question is yours to answer. If you saw injustice happening in front of you, would you stay silent or would you finally speak?